So, how does sovereignty work anyway? I'm scratching my head. I'm not really digging into my scalp. How does sovereignty work anyway? That's the topic of this episode. Welcome to the Heavens Metal Vodcast. I want to talk about sovereignty. I don't know whether to talk about football or the Bible first. Let's just talk about football. Today, I'm filming this on the day of the NFL Draft 2026, and hoping the Dallas Cowboys draft some really good players. So, how does sovereignty work? Remember the Dallas Cowboys of the 90s? They had a dynasty. They won 3 Super Bowls in 4 years. And, if they hadn't have let Deion Sanders get swept away from Atlanta by the San Francisco 49ers and Ken Norton Jr., who was on the Cowboys in their back-to-back Super Bowls, they would have won the NFC Championship against the 49ers and, of course, steamrolled the Chargers in the Super Bowl. Sorry, San Diego fans, but everybody knows that in the early 90s, the NFC Championship game was the real Super Bowl. Dallas and San Francisco played, and then the fourth year in a row is Dallas and Green Bay. The two best teams in the league played, and the winner went on to win the Super Bowl fairly easily. Anyway, so when you're talking about sovereignty, sometimes you think about, well, God's going to protect me. God's will is always done. So let's take a time out on football. Use a football term, and let's talk about some biblical examples. King David, anointed as king, anointed by the prophet Samuel as king of Israel, which was a pretty important distinction in office. He was anointed as king while Saul was still king. And Saul was going crazy. He was jealous. He had heard that, Samuel anointed somebody else as king, or the word on the street was, that Saul has killed his thousands, but David his 10,000s. And so Saul was out to kill him. He tried to kill him with a spear more than once. And so what did David do? God's anointed David in the lineage of the Messiah, King Jesus. David, there was a plan. God had a plan to use King David. He was, that's the lineage of the Messiah. And as God's chosen for being king of Israel. So God's choice, God's will. Why in the heck was David out in the wilderness hiding from Saul, who was trying to kill him? Could it be that he had to avoid death and to avoid canceling out God's plan? Maybe God would have used somebody else at that point. We can't, in hindsight, looking back, it's hard to say, and, it's an easy answer to say, well, God would have found a way. That's true. God could have found a way to protect David from Saul. He could have stuck his invisible hand up in front of the spear and thwarted a spearing attempt from Saul. But what did God use instead? He used David's fight or flight reaction, his natural body reaction, to run and hide for his life. Okay, let's go even more spiritual. Joseph and Mary, the stepfather and the mother of Jesus, were warned in a dream by God to flee to Egypt because Herod was going to kill him. He was after this new king of the Jews that was going to be born. So they fled. In the cover of darkness, they fled to Egypt to hide out. Why would the King of Kings, who could call a legion of angels down, run and hide? Why wouldn't he stand up and be Superman and use his divinity shield to shield off an attack? Why wouldn't the little baby infant had raised his little pinky at a cohort of Roman soldiers and knocked them all to the ground? Well, God didn't operate that way. I'm not going to say he never can or never will. Jesus said himself, if I could call down a legion of angels right now and take care of this, but he chose not to. And God used Joseph's mother bear, father bear, what do you call it, when somebody's born with something, a trait, instinct. Use that instinct of Joseph's to save Jesus, the Son of God. And think about Exodus. And yes, I'm talking about the Bay Area Thrashers here. No, Exodus in the Bible, those people had to flee for their lives. If God promised them the promised land, why couldn't he just pave the way and ushered them or taken them up in a flaming chariot and transported them across the Jordan and set them down, all million of them? No, God used real-time fight or flight, swift feet, action, moving to rescue his own people. So how does sovereignty working with that? Does God allow us to do our own thing, for lack of a better word? And there's got to be better words than doing our own thing. But yeah, God works with us. We sinners are all that God has to work with when he's talking about humanity. And so God used people and their natural abilities and fear and urgency and stress. All these things were factors in carrying on the life and lineage of Jesus Christ, the Messiah. Now let's go back to football. Okay, the Dallas Cowboys, they had a dynasty. If they hadn't fired Jimmy Johnson, way to go, Jerry, they would have won 4 Super Bowls in a row. Michael Irvin says they would have won 4 or 5. Probably true. But as good as they were, and as loud as their automobiles were driving up and down the road, as good as they were, I remember as a fan of the Dallas Cowboys watching those games and those seasons they won the Super Bowl. I didn't know they were going to win. It wasn't a guarantee. There were some losses in those seasons. There was like a 12-4 records. I don't know if they had a 13-3 record that year, but there were some losses, and there were some nail-biter games. In that first NFC Championship against the 49ers, there was a moment where it looked like the momentum had swung towards the 49ers' way. And back in their own territory, the Cowboys called a deep post route, and Michael Irvin had been running this route time and time again, but Aikman was always throwing it to Harper. And so Michael, on his own initiative, went over and switched places with Harper, says, no, you get over here. And lo and behold, they ran the route properly, and Alvin Harper caught that 70-yard pass that broke the game open, that gave Dallas their first Super Bowl in up-teen years. But up to that moment, there was tension. There wasn't a guarantee that they would win. Until that clock strikes all zeros, you don't know if you're going to win or not. There's an amount of uncertainty and maybe fear and, just stress. Are we going to win this game or not? You're trying your best. It's a human endeavor at that point. And so God uses humanity to get his will done. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that cool? It's kind of wild, but God seems to do that. He works with these fallen vessels, and there's moments where, Joseph and Mary grabbed little baby Jesus and fled to Egypt in the middle of the night. There was some stress involved, and there was oh, did you hear that? Oh, it could have been a guard. Oh, run, hide. That's like some serious intense stress, and that was involved. So any wrong move, they could have been exposed and killed. I know it's easy to say, oh, God would have stepped in and sent an angel down to protect baby Jesus from getting killed. Yeah, I agree with that, but that's not what God did. He used Joseph leading his family, taking Mary and baby Jesus to Egypt to escape death. There was danger. There was a real risk involved for the Son of God. Now, is that wild or what? Now, so I think that might give us a little bit of comfort in knowing that even though you might have been confident that the Cowboys are going to win those games and go to the Super Bowl that year and win it all, you didn't know for sure. There's no guarantees. The football bounces funny ways. It's got 2 points on either end, and that when that ball hits the ground, it can bounce funny, and luck can have it to where you can lose a game based upon a bad call, a bad bounce of the football. So there's risk, and whenever there's risk, there's a chance of loss. And so somehow the sovereignty of God works with humanity and works with these situations where, we don't know what the outcome is going to be. When the disciples had lost one of their companions, Judas Iscariot, who hung himself, they decided we need to have 12, and they cast lots to pick Matthias, who was the new 12th disciple. God bless Matthias. I'd like to hear from him someday. We're going to have him on the podcast next week, I wish. Anyway, they cast lots. They might have thrown dice or thrown sticks of different sizes or something to pick this man. So they didn't know the outcome. They didn't know it was going to be Matthias versus another Joseph versus another dude over here and there and everywhere. And so there's randomness and uncertainty in our lives, and that's the way God planned it. And praise God, He is sovereign over us, and He is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. So He's eternal, and I would teach that He's outside of time, and that He can maybe see the beginning of the world and the end of the world sitting back in His chair watching the timeline. I don't know if that's true, but that's one way I've wrapped my head around what eternity means and what the otherness of God means. But I don't know. I'm just a man. I'm fallible, and I've only got a brain that's this big. But there you go. Join the discussion. And I'm wearing this hoodie of a new show I'm doing on this very channel. It's called The Critic and the Professor, with me and a guy named Peter Emerson, who crafted, composed, and directed this rock opera on the nativity of Jesus. And you know what? The flight of Joseph and Mary is part of that story and that presentation. It's like rock and roll, lasers, cool lights, fog, video screens, narration by Peter Sorbo. Anyway, so check out my new show, The Critic and the Professor. It's on this channel. It's just another playlist that's underneath the Heaven's Metal playlist. And join the discussion. Leave some comments. Tell me that you're mad or happy or agree or disagree or whatever. How about them Cowboys?
Hey, have you seen one of those videos on Facebook where they like give somebody a first reaction? You got like this female opera singer, and she hears like Queensryche for the first time, and it just blows her mind. Well, don't you wish there was like a Christian version of that? Well, we are the Christian version of that first reaction. This is The Critic and the Professor, and we're gonna get a first reaction of a Christian heavy metal song from this music expert guru guy here.
Too much.